The watchers in the darkness have been kind. As I speak these words, Void of Fears hovers just 900 subscribers away from our 10k goal. Each of you who clicks that subscribe button pulls another thread from the veil between worlds. Every like and comment feeds what waits in the shadows. Your support has carried this channel through the blackest nights. The entity that guides these stories acknowledges your presence. Now let's dive into the void where tonight's nightmare awaits you. 46 days without sunlight changes a person, but what's happening to me now is something else entirely. My skin has begun to shimmer under the harsh fluorescent emergency lighting, translucent patches spreading across my forearms like frost on a window pane. When I press my fingertips against the cold steel door, they no longer leave condensation marks. Instead, tiny crystals form where flesh meets metal, bridging the gap between organic and inorganic. My reflection in the polished surface shows my irises have started absorbing light rather than reflecting it, black holes rimmed with electric blue. I need to record what happened here at Frostpoint Alpha. The world deserves to know the truth before the military arrives with their protocol winter cleanse, before whatever I'm becoming completes its transformation. 3 months ago, I was just Dr. Everett Blackwood, respected glaciologist and xenobiologist, comfortable in my university lab at Northwestern. I specialized in organisms that thrived in extreme cold, psychrophiles that could metabolize at temperatures where most life goes dormant. My paper on adaptive genetic responses in Arctic microbiota had earned me a modest reputation in academic circles. Nothing that should have put me on any government radar. Then came the recruitment. 2 agents in suits so generic they seemed designed to be forgotten, waiting outside my lab one rainy Tuesday evening. "Dr. Blackwood," the taller one said, not a question but a confirmation. "Your country needs your expertise." I almost laughed. It sounded like dialogue from a spy film, not something said to a scientist whose most exciting weekly activity was calibrating electron microscopes. They showed me satellite imagery of something embedded in the Ellesmere Island ice sheet, something that had changed the surrounding glacial structure in ways that defied explanation, something that emitted heat without melting the ice around it. I signed so many non-disclosure agreements, the pen ran out of ink. They brought another. I asked questions they wouldn't answer. I hesitated until they mentioned the funding, enough to support my lab for a decade. Enough to prove or disprove theories I've been developing for years about life's adaptability in hostile environments. Now I'm possibly the last uninfected human in a facility that's become a slaughterhouse. Or perhaps I'm not uninfected at all, just at an earlier stage than the others. The facility's emergency power won't last much longer. The backup generators were designed to function for 72 hours. We're approaching hour 70. The temperature control systems are already failing in the outer sections. Soon the Arctic cold will reclaim these corridors, but I suspect that won't bother the transformed staff anymore. I can hear them outside the door, scratching, not violently, but with an eerie patience. 3 distinct patterns of movement, probably Baranov, Webb, and whoever else survived the last structural collapse. They know I can't stay in here forever. They know eventually I'll need to face what they've become. Periodically, their scratching synchronizes into perfect rhythm, then diverges again, like jazz musicians improvising around a theme. Sometimes I hear whispering in a language that sounds like crystal chimes breaking. I try not to listen too closely. Understanding might speed the changes already beginning in my mind. So, let me tell you how the world as we know it began to end. Let me tell you about the visitor, about Frostpoint Alpha, and about the choice humanity now faces. A choice between remaining human in the face of extinction, or becoming something unrecognizable in order to survive. The journey to Frostpoint Alpha was deliberately disorienting. First, a military transport to Thule Air Base in Greenland. where I waited 3 days in a windowless room with 5 other specialists, none of whom would discuss their fields of expertise. Then, a night flight on a modified C-130, the cargo hold retrofitted with austere seating but no amenities. We landed somewhere in northern Canada for refueling. At least that's what I guessed from overheard conversations among the crew. They confiscated our watches, our phones, anything that might help us track time or location. Finally, a helicopter transfer for the last leg. The endless white of the Arctic Circle stretched below us. No landmarks, no reference points, just blinding white under steel-grey skies. The disorientation was clearly strategic. They didn't want anyone knowing exactly where we were going. When Frostpoint Alpha first came into view, I initially mistook it for a natural formation. Only the landing pad and communication arrays betrayed its human origin. The main facility was built directly into a massive glacier with only about 20% visible above the ice. First time north of the 80th parallel, Doc. The pilot had to shout over the rotors. She was young, but her eyes looked ancient, like she'd seen things that had aged her from the inside out. I nodded, eyes fixed on what looked like the entrance to a bunker built directly into the glacier wall. Massive steel doors stood open, spilling yellow light onto the pristine snow. Figures in Arctic gear moved with practiced efficiency, unloading supplies from another helicopter that had landed before us. Well, don't get too comfortable. Most newbies don't last the full rotation. She tapped her temple significantly. Something about the isolation. Does things to your head. The darkness especially. I've worked in Antarctica during winter, I replied. I'm familiar with polar night. Her laugh was hollow. This is different, trust me. The darkness outside isn't what gets to you here. As we landed, I saw armed guards emerging from the entrance, their black tactical gear stark against the snow. This wasn't the scientific expedition I'd been led to expect. This was military. Director Kessler met me at the entrance, a tall, gaunt man with eyes that seemed permanently narrowed in suspicion. His handshake was perfunctory, his greeting colder than the air outside. Dr. Blackwood, follow me. We're already behind schedule. No welcome package, no orientation. Just a brisk pace through corridors that sloped downward, carved directly into the ice and reinforced with steel and concrete. Your clearance has been approved for levels 1 through 4, Kessler explained without turning. Level 5 requires my personal authorization. Deviation from assigned areas is grounds for immediate termination of your contract. I was told I'd be studying ice core samples, I said, struggling to keep pace. The government didn't exactly... What you were told was what you needed to know to get you here, Kessler cut me off. What you need to know now is different. We passed through a security checkpoint where guards scanned my retinas and took my fingerprints. Beyond it, the facility opened into what the staff apparently called the hive, the main living and working area. Unlike the entrance, this space hummed with activity. Scientists in lab coats, security personnel, and support staff moved with purpose. The walls here were covered with thermal insulation rather than exposed ice, giving the illusion of a normal research facility. Except, normal research facilities don't have automatic weapons mounted at checkpoints, or scanners that seemed to be measuring more than just metal objects. As one guard waved a wand over me, I noticed the readings weren't simply binary, detecting prohibited items or not, but displayed complex bio-readings that flashed green before he waved me through. 37 personnel total, Kessler continued as we walked deeper into the complex, each with specific functions: 12 security personnel, 15 scientific staff, 10 support crew. Your credentials in extremophile adaptation made you valuable, Doctor. Your work on organism survival in extreme pressure environments was particularly relevant. Don't make me regret bringing you here. I wanted to point out that studying bacteria that survive in deep-sea thermal vents isn't the same as whatever was happening in this facility, but something in Kessler's demeanor suggested Questions wouldn't be welcomed until he decided I was ready for answers. The corridors were surprisingly warm compared to the frozen exterior, but there was an underlying chill that seemed baked into the structure itself. The walls themselves appeared to be some kind of specialized insulation layered over the native ice, with pipes and conduits running along the ceiling at regular intervals. Lighting strips were embedded at floor level, creating an eerie upward glow that cast strange shadows. As we rounded a corner, I noticed black marks on the walls, not dirt or grime, but what looked like burn patterns radiating outward from a central point. Kessler saw me looking and immediately steered me to the opposite side of the corridor. "Electrical malfunction last month," he said curtly. "Nothing to concern yourself with." A woman approached us, tablet in hand. She had sharp features and calculating eyes that evaluated me in seconds. Her lab coat was immaculate, but her fingernails were bitten to the quick, a sign of stress at odds with her composed demeanour. "Dr. Thornhill, our lead scientist," Kessler introduced. "She'll brief you on the specimen." The way he said specimen, with a mixture of reverence and unease, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Specimen?" I asked, noting the term rather than samples or subjects. Singular, not plural. Dr. Thornhill studied me for a moment before responding, as if gauging my readiness for whatever lay ahead. Her expression remained carefully neutral, but I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Excitement, fear, pride. It vanished before I could identify it. "Follow me, Dr. Blackwood, and prepare yourself. What you're about to see will change your understanding of our place in the universe." Her tone was clinical, but the words themselves felt rehearsed, as if she'd delivered this introduction many times before. We descended further, passing through 2 more security checkpoints. Each required not just retinal scans, but blood samples. Quick finger pricks, analysed by machines that looked far more advanced than anything I'd seen in mainstream research facilities. The guards at each checkpoint wore sidearms and had the hypervigilant posture of people expecting trouble at any moment. The air grew noticeably colder, despite the environmental systems. Our breath began to fog as we reached level 3, and by level 4 I could feel the chill penetrating my standard issue thermal clothing. At the final checkpoint, Dr. Thornhill paused before a massive airlock door. Unlike the previous barriers, this one was constructed of some composite material I didn't recognize. Not standard steel or titanium, but something with an almost greenish tint. Under the lights. Beyond this point, cellular phones, digital watches, anything with a microchip, is strictly prohibited. The specimen interferes with electronics in ways we still don't fully understand. She gestured to a series of lockers. "Store everything electronic here. That includes your watch, any medical devices, even battery-operated equipment." "What exactly am I going to be working with?" I asked, removing my watch and the digital thermometer I carried out of professional habit. She hesitated, glancing at the guards who had stepped just out of earshot, a practice move that suggested this conversation happened regularly. Then she spoke quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Officially, it's xenobiological entity Alpha. Unofficially, we call it the Visitor." The way she said "visitor," with both reverence and unease, sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. The airlock cycled with a series of hisses and mechanical whirs. The process took nearly a minute, far longer than necessary for simple pressure equalization. I noted status lights changing from red to amber to green on a panel beside the door, suggesting multiple containment protocols being satisfied sequentially. Finally, the massive door swung inwards, releasing a rush of even colder air that carried an odd smell, something like ozone mixed with an unfamiliar metallic tang that made my sinuses tingle uncomfortably. We stepped into level 4, a vast laboratory space with at least a dozen scientists working at various stations. The equipment here was unlike anything I'd seen before. specialized instruments with no visible electronic components, mechanical measuring devices using principles I couldn't immediately identify, and analog recording systems that seemed deliberately archaic in design. Scientists spoke in hushed tones, their conversations creating a soft murmur that echoed strangely in the cavernous space. But all my attention was immediately drawn to the center of the room, where a cylindrical containment chamber rose from floor to ceiling. It was constructed of what appeared to be layered materials, glass or some transparent polymer, interspersed with metallic meshes and reinforced with structural supports of an unusual design. The entire chamber was surrounded by a ring of instruments, constantly measuring something. Inside, suspended in what appeared to be a specialized atmospheric chamber, was a rock. No, not just a rock. Even from this distance, I could see it was like no meteorite I'd ever studied. Roughly the size of a small car, its surface wasn't the charred black of typical meteorites, but rather a deep, iridescent blue-green that seemed to shift and change as I looked at it, like oil on water, but more vibrant, more alive. Veins of luminescent material pulsed through it like blood vessels, following patterns that seemed almost deliberate in their rhythm. The air around it shimmered slightly, creating a mirage effect that distorted the space within the chamber. Most disturbing of all was the sensation I felt looking at it, a strange pressure behind my eyes, almost like the beginnings of a headache, but somehow pleasant, inviting. I found myself taking involuntary steps toward it before Dr. Thornhill placed a restraining hand on my arm. "The pull is normal," she said quietly. "Everyone feels it the first time. It'll fade as your brain adapts." "My God," I whispered, unable to take my eyes off the pulsing object. "That's not this Earth," Dr. Thornhill finished, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. "No, it's not. And neither is what's living inside it. We've confirmed non-terrestrial isotope ratios in every sample we've analysed. Whatever this is, it formed somewhere else, under conditions we can barely comprehend." She turned to face me directly, her eyes intense. "What you're looking at, Dr. Blackwood, is the most important scientific discovery in human history, and you're one of the few people on Earth cleared to study it." The first 2 weeks at Frostpoint Alpha were a blur of tests, observations, and security briefings. Each morning began with a medical examination, blood work, neurological assessment, psychological evaluation. At first, I assumed this was the standard protocol for an isolated research station, but I soon learned these tests were specifically designed to monitor for signs of contamination or influence from the visitor. "We've observed unusual neurological patterns in personnel with prolonged exposure," Dr. Leon Amari explained, while drawing yet another vial of my blood. The medical officer was young, but carried himself with the weary competence of someone who had seen too much. "Nothing dangerous, just changes, increased activity in regions typically dormant in adult brains." "What kind of changes?" I asked. His eyes flickered momentarily to the security camera before he responded with practiced vagueness. "Just keeping an eye on things. Procedure." The meteorite, the visitor, defied conventional analysis. Its outer layer contained elements not found on our periodic table. Its core registered temperatures well above freezing despite the controlled Arctic environment surrounding it. It seemed to absorb energy from its surroundings in ways that violated thermodynamic principles, creating micro-environments of impossible stability. But most disturbing were the life forms we detected within its crystalline structure, microscopic organisms that seemed to exist in a state between liquid and solid, between organic and inorganic. They resembled nothing in Earth's biological record, not bacteria, not archaea, not viruses, but something with characteristics of all three while being fundamentally different. They respond to electrical stimulation, Dr. Varma explained during my first examination. The physicist had been at Frostpoint longer than most, Nearly 2 years according to facility records I'd accessed, and dark circles under his eyes suggested the toll it had taken. His hands shook slightly as he manipulated the specialized instruments, a tremor he attempted to hide by gripping the equipment more firmly than necessary. "Watch this," he said, adjusting a dial on a device that generated extremely low-frequency electrical fields. He applied a mild current to a sample contained in a sealed observation chamber, and the organisms immediately reorganized themselves into complex patterns, like iron filings responding to a magnet, but with purpose, with intelligence. The formations weren't random, they created structures with symmetry and recurring motifs, arrangements that suggested information encoding rather than simple reaction. More disturbing still was how they changed under continued observation. The patterns evolved, becoming more complex, as if the act of being studied accelerated their development. Several times I could swear they formed structures that resembled Earth symbols, circles, triangles, spirals, before dissolving back into chaotic arrangements. "Are they communicating?" I asked, unable to shake the feeling that these movements were deliberate attempts to convey information. "We believe so, but not with us, with each other. Or perhaps..." Dr. Varma's voice trailed off as he stared at the organisms, rearranging themselves once more. "Perhaps what?" Dr. Varma looked around the lab before lowering his voice. He seemed thinner than when I'd met him just days earlier, his skin pallid despite the lab's warm lighting. "Perhaps with something else, something not here yet. Look at this frequency analysis." He pulled up data showing electromagnetic emissions from the meteorite, recorded over several months. The pattern showed clear peaks and troughs, repeating but with subtle variations, like a signal being broadcast outward. "It's getting stronger," he whispered. "Whatever message it's sending, it's becoming more urgent. And these organisms, they're changing too, becoming more complex. I think they're preparing. Preparing for what?" Instead of answering, he pulled up another file. Images of the night sky taken through the facility's observatory. Several frames showed unusual light patterns among the stars. Not meteors or satellites, but something that seemed to pulse with the same rhythmic pattern as the organisms under our microscope. "They didn't come here by accident, Dr. Blackwood. They were sent, and I think more are coming." I soon learned that Dr. Varma's suspicions weren't unique. During meals in the facility's cafeteria, aptly named the Freeze, I began noticing the divisions among staff. The security personnel, led by the stern Commander Reeves, kept to themselves, hands never far from their weapons. They occupied tables nearest the exits, their conversations hushed but intense, eyes constantly scanning the room. Occasionally they would touch the sidearms holstered at their hips, an unconscious gesture that seemed more for reassurance than preparation. The scientists clustered in small groups determined by their specialties and clearance levels. Conversation stopped whenever someone new approached, resuming only after the newcomer either joined or moved on. Laughter was rare, and when it came, too loud and brittle. And then there were those who worked most closely with the visitor. They ate alone, spoke little, and their eyes carried a distant look, as if perpetually distracted by something only they could perceive. Dr. Thornhill was among these, though she maintained a veneer of normalcy that the others seemed to have abandoned. She would sit with her tablet, making notes while barely touching her food, occasionally glancing up with a slight smile, as if responding to an unheard comment. Most concerning were the physical changes in those with highest exposure levels. Nothing dramatic, nothing you'd notice if you weren't looking for it, but present nonetheless. Slightly altered gaits, as if they were relearning how to walk. Changed speech patterns with unusual cadences. And their skin. In certain light, it seemed to have a subtle iridescence, like oil on water but almost imperceptible. The facility operated on a 24-hour schedule despite the perpetual Arctic night outside. Time became a construct, maintained by clocks rather than environmental cues. People spoke of day shifts and night shifts, but the terms were meaningless abstractions in a place where sunlight hadn't penetrated for weeks and wouldn't for months to come. I was cleaning my equipment one evening, or what the clock designated as evening, when Isabella Novak approached my station. A biologist specializing in evolutionary adaptations. She was one of the few staff members who seemed genuinely friendly. Unlike others who worked with the visitor samples, she maintained a warmth that seemed increasingly rare among the personnel. "You've noticed it too, haven't you?" she asked without preamble, her voice low despite the ambient noise of lab equipment that would mask normal conversation. "Noticed what?" I kept my expression neutral, aware of the cameras that monitored every corner of the lab. The changes in people who work with the samples too long? She pretended to help me organize slides, positioning herself to block the camera's view of her mouth. "Flynn hasn't slept in 3 days, not even cat naps. His productivity has tripled, but his research notes have become strange. Okada talks to herself in the shower room. Not normal muttering, but conversations, with pauses as if she's listening to responses. And Thornhill." She glanced around nervously, her fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on the lab bench. "I've seen her sneaking into level 5 at night, with samples that aren't logged in the containment records." "Level 5 is restricted," I said, recalling Kessler's words from my first day. "Even Kessler needs authorization from someone higher up." Isabella's laugh was bitter, barely more than an exhalation. "You still think there's someone higher up? This place is a black site, Everett. We're off the books. That's why they put us in the middle of nowhere. That's why there's no real-time communication with the outside. Everything goes through filters, gets reviewed, sanitized." She leaned closer, ostensibly examining a slide. "2 months ago we lost contact with a similar facility in Siberia. Complete communications blackout. The official story was equipment failure due to extreme weather, but I accessed restricted files before they locked down the system. There was another meteorite there, Everett. Another visitor, and their last transmission." She shuddered visibly. It wasn't human. Not entirely. A security officer walked past, and Isabella immediately changed the subject, discussing mundane findings from ice core samples with forced brightness. But as she left, she pressed a folded note into my palm with practiced subtlety. I waited until I was in my quarters, away from the omnipresent cameras of the lab, to read it. "Meet me in storage room B, 2300 hours. Bring no one. Disable your tracking implant. Remove the bandage on your upper arm. Use electromagnetic pulse device in bottom drawer of your desk. They monitor everywhere else. Trust no one who's worked level 4 more than 1 month." The storage room was dimly lit and filled with stacked equipment cases. Isabella was already there when I arrived, along with Marcus Webb, a communications technician, known for his conspiracy theories. "Show him," Isabella urged. Webb handed me a tablet. "I've been intercepting transmissions between Kessler and government offices. They're not just studying this thing, they hunted it. Look at the dates." The documents showed that orbital tracking systems had identified the visitor 6 months before its arrival. Resources had been mobilized to retrieve it specifically. "That's not all," Isabella added. "The Russians, the Chinese, they've found fragments too. This thing didn't just crash, it broke apart in the atmosphere, scattered itself across the Arctic Circle." "Like it wanted to be found in multiple locations," Webb said. "Or it wanted to seed itself," I suggested, the implications hitting me suddenly. "If these organisms are alive and can survive interstellar travel, then they could be an invasion force," Webb finished. Isabella shook her head. "Or refugees. We don't know their intentions." A noise from outside made us freeze. Webb quickly powered down the tablet, and we tried to look busy inventorying supplies as the door opened. Valery Baranov, the facility's Russian engineer, stood in the doorway. His weathered face betrayed nothing, but his eyes seemed to linger on each of us a beat too long. "Problem with heating system," he said in his thick accent. "Need check valves." We watched in tense silence as he collected some tools and left. Isabella let out a shaky breath. "We should go, separately. Don't trust anyone, Everett." As she and Webb departed, I found myself wondering if I should trust them either. The next morning, the facility was buzzing with news. Mira Okada, one of the lab technicians, had been found wandering outside the facility without protective gear. In temperatures cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes, she'd been walking calmly, seemingly unaffected by the cold. Dr. Leon Amari, our medical officer, had her in isolation. I managed to see her through the observation window. Her skin had a faint bluish tint, and her eyes seemed more reflective than normal, like a cat's. "She keeps saying she heard it calling her," Amari told me, genuine fear in his voice, "that it showed her the stars. The visitor. Something within it. Something that's awake now." He showed me her brain scans. "Look at this activity in the pineal gland. It's off the charts. And these new neural pathways forming. It's like her brain is being rewired." Before I could ask more questions, an alarm blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights flashed in the corridors. Over the intercom, Kessler's voice remained eerily calm. "Attention all personnel. We have a containment breach in level 4. This is not a drill. Security teams to stations. All other personnel, lockdown procedures are in effect." I ran towards the lab. The rational part of my mind said I should be heading in the opposite direction, but my scientific curiosity overrode my survival instinct. By the time I reached level 4, chaos had erupted. The containment chamber that held the visitor was cracked. Not broken completely, but a spider web of fractures spread across its surface. Through the fissures, a luminous blue mist was escaping, hanging in the air like an earthbound aurora. Security personnel in hazmat suits were attempting to seal the breach while scientists scrambled to collect their research. Dr. Thornhill stood watching the scene with an expression that chilled me, more than the Arctic wind ever could. Not fear, but satisfaction. She noticed me staring and quickly composed her features. "Dr. Blackwood, you should be in your quarters." "What happened?" I demanded. "Pressure anomaly. Nothing to concern yourself with." But her eyes betrayed her. The pupils had expanded, almost eliminating the iris, and within them I swore I saw a flicker of blue light. Commander Reeves approached, his face hidden behind his tactical mask. "All non-essential personnel out, now." As I was escorted from the lab, I glanced back one last time. The mist was behaving unlike any gas I'd ever seen, moving against air currents, forming momentary patterns before dissipating, almost like it was searching. That night the storm hit. Arctic weather is notoriously unpredictable, but this storm seemed timed too perfectly to be coincidence. Winds exceeding 100 miles per hour battered the facility, and temperatures dropped to minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The communications array was the first casualty, sheared off the roof by the gale. We were cut off, no communications, no evacuation possible. And then the power failed. I was in my quarters when the lights went out. Emergency systems kicked in immediately, bathing the corridors in an eerie red glow. The intercom crackled with static before Kessler's voice broke through. "Backup generators at 60% capacity. All personnel remain in current locations until..." His message cut off abruptly. In the silence that followed, I heard something moving in the ventilation system above my head. Not the normal mechanical sounds of the facility, but something organic. Scraping, pulsing, exploring. My door slid open, revealing Isabella. Her face was pale, her expression frantic. "They're dead," she whispered. "Flynn and 2 security officers. They were in the lab when the containment failed completely. How? It wasn't the breach itself. Something changed them. Their bodies. She struggled to find words. Their tissue crystallized from the inside out, like they were turning into something like the Visitor. A facility-wide alert interrupted us. Attention. Contamination detected in environmental systems. Air filtration compromised. All personnel utilize emergency breathing apparatus until further notice. Isabella pulled 2 masks from her bag, handing one to me. I took these from the emergency station. We need to find Amari. He was studying Okada's blood work. He might know what we're dealing with. The medical bay was on level 2, accessible by stairs now that the elevators were non-operational. As we climbed, the temperature noticeably dropped. Our breath fogged in front of us despite the masks. The heating system's failing, I noted. Isabella shook her head. Not failing, being sabotaged. I saw Baranov at the control panel before the storm hit. He wasn't fixing anything, he was disabling safeguards. When we reached level 2, we found the medical bay doors locked. Through the reinforced glass windows, we could see Amari hunched over his microscope. He didn't respond to our knocking. "We need to find another way in," I said. "No need." The voice behind us belonged to Dr. Thornhill. She held a security keycard. "I can get you inside, but you need to understand what you're walking into." Her calm demeanor raised alarm bells, but we had little choice. She swiped the card and the doors slid open. The medical bay was freezing, our breath creating clouds despite our masks. Amari didn't look up as we entered, his attention fixed on his microscope. "Leon," Isabella called, "we need your help." When he finally turned, I had to stifle a gasp. The whites of his eyes had turned a pale blue, and frost patterns spread across his cheeks like delicate ferns. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice distorted as if multiple people were speaking in unison. "The Visitor isn't a threat, it's a gift." He held up a slide containing a blood sample. Within the red cells, blue crystalline structures were forming, connecting, reorganizing. The organisms from the meteorite, I realized. They're airborne now. "And we've all been breathing them in," Thornhill confirmed, removing her mask. "Some of us longer than others." Isabella backed toward the door, but Thornhill blocked her path. "You don't understand yet, but you will. The Visitor is just the first. They've been coming here for millennia, dormant until now. Evolution was too slow, so they've brought us the next step themselves." Amari rose from his seat, moving with unnatural smoothness. "Let me show you what I've seen." He reached for Isabella, who screamed and shoved past Thornhill through the still open door. I followed immediately, slamming my hand on the emergency lockdown button. The reinforced doors slid shut, trapping Thornhill and Amari inside. "We need to find Kessler," I told Isabella as we ran. "He has to know what's happening." "Kessler?" She laughed hysterically. "Kessler probably orchestrated this whole thing." But we had nowhere else to turn. The command center on level 1 was our only hope for external communication and, potentially, evacuation. The scene in the command center confirmed our worst fears. Kessler was there, but he wasn't in charge anymore. The room was filled with staff members, some security, some scientists, all exhibiting the same blue-tinged skin and unnaturally reflective eyes. And at the center stood Valery Baranov, interfacing directly with the facility's main computer. Blue crystalline structures had grown from his fingertips into the computer itself, pulsing with light as data flowed between man and machine. Kessler noticed us first. Unlike the others, he appeared to be fighting the transformation. Blood trickled from his nose and ears, and his movements were jerky, like a puppet resisting its strings. "Blackwood," he croaked, "you need to activate Winter Cleanse. Authorization code Theta 9 Frost." A security officer, I recognized Lieutenant Frost despite his partially transformed face, turned his weapon toward Kessler. Director, you are compromised. Stand down." Kessler lunged for the central console, fingers stretching toward an emergency protocol button. Frost fired 3 rounds into his chest. Kessler collapsed but, impossibly, continued crawling toward the console, blue fluid now mixing with his red blood. "The code," he gasped, looking directly at me. "Theta 9 Frost. The failsafe. Before they..." Frost fired again, and Kessler went still. Isabella pulled me back into the corridor before they could spot us. "What's winter cleans?" she whispered. "Some kind of emergency protocol. Probably designed for this exact scenario." I checked the facility map on the wall. "There's an auxiliary communications room on this level. We might be able to send out a distress call from there." The auxiliary room was small, clearly designed as a backup. Most of the equipment was offline, but a hardwired emergency system remained functional. I activated it while Isabella barricaded the door. "This is Frostpoint Alpha," I transmitted. "Emergency situation, biological contamination, request immediate protocol, winter cleans, authorization Theta 9 Frost." "Static," answered me. Then a burst of coherent response. "Frostpoint Alpha, this is Arctic Command. Authentication confirmed. Winter cleans protocol initiated. ETA 3 hours. Secure all uncontaminated personnel and prepare for sterilization procedures." The transmission cut off. Isabella looked at me with wide eyes. "Sterilization procedures? What does that mean?" Before I could speculate, the barricaded door burst open. Marcus Webb stood in the doorway, his transformation more advanced than any we'd seen. Crystalline structures protruded from his shoulders and back, and his eyes were completely blue, pupilless. "You shouldn't have done that, Everett," he said, his voice layered with harmonics that made my teeth vibrate. "The visitor is not your enemy. It's escaping extinction, just as we soon will be." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, positioning myself between him and Isabella. The visitor showed me. Their world died as their star expanded. They evolved, becoming beings of crystalline complexity that could survive the journey between stars. They've been coming here for millennia, waiting for the right moment, for when this world too faces extinction. "Earth isn't dying," Isabella argued. Webb's laugh was like breaking glass. "Isn't it? The visitor knows. It's seen our future. Resource depletion, climate collapse, war. The 6th mass extinction is already underway. But we can transcend all that. Become something that doesn't need oxygen, doesn't fear radiation or vacuum. Something that could survive when Earth cannot." As he spoke, more transformed staff members appeared behind him. Their movements were synchronized, as if guided by a single mind. "Evolution or extinction," Webb continued. "That's the choice the visitor offers. Not invasion, salvation." I noticed the emergency evacuation map beside the communications console. There was an unmarked area on level 5, beyond even the containment chamber. "What's in the restricted section of level 5? I asked abruptly. Webb's expression flickered with surprise, the first truly human reaction I'd seen from him. "The others. The visitor isn't the first. Your government has been collecting them for decades, studying them, fearing them, but never understanding them." "We need to see for ourselves," I decided, grabbing Isabella's hand. "If what you're saying is true." "You will," Webb assured us. "The visitor wants you to, especially you, Everett. Your work on extremophile adaptation. You've been preparing for this your entire career without knowing it." He stepped aside, the others behind him parting to form a path. "We won't force you. Choice is essential for complete integration. The military will be here soon with their sterilization. See the truth before you decide." Against every instinct, we followed them. Level 5 was colder than any other part of the facility, our breath forming crystalline clouds that hung suspended in the air, longer than seemed natural. The main chamber where the visitor had been held was empty now, its containment unit shattered, but beyond it, through a heavily reinforced door that now stood open, lay answers. The chamber was vast, carved deep into the glacier, and it contained dozens of meteorite fragments, some small as pebbles, others larger than the visitor, all exhibiting the same iridescent blue-green coloration. Some appeared dormant, others pulsed with the same rhythmic glow we'd observed in the visitor. Operation Coldfire, Webb explained, a decades-long program to intercept and contain these arrivals. The government knew what was coming but chose fear over understanding. At the center of the chamber stood Dr. Thornhill, now transformed beyond recognition. The crystalline structures had replaced much of her human form, making her appear almost like a living statue. Yet her movements remained graceful, purposeful. "The visitor spoke to me first," she said, her voice resonating through the crystalline structures around us. "It recognized me from my work on silicon-based theoretical biology. It knew I would understand." "Understand what?" I asked. "That life is more adaptable than we ever imagined. Carbon-based life is fragile, temporary, but silicon crystal structures can endure for millennia, transmit information with perfect fidelity, survive conditions that would destroy organic matter instantly." She gestured to the collected meteorites. "They've been coming here since before humans existed, waiting in the ice, dormant until Earth reached a critical point, when its dominant species achieved both the technological capability to destroy itself and the awareness to recognize its own mortality." Isabella had moved to one of the research stations, examining data on a still functional monitor. "These meteorites, they're not random. They've been systematically distributed across Earth's coldest regions, like they were mapping landing sites." "For what?" I asked. Webb and Thornhill exchanged looks. "For what comes next," Webb said. "The visitor is only a scout. The main vessel approaches, a fragment of their homeworld, carrying billions of their kind. It will arrive within the year." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "And when it does?" "Transformation on a planetary scale," Thornhill said simply. "Not destruction, transcendence. Humanity will evolve beyond its biological limitations, beyond disease, aging, environmental dependency. We will become like them, eternal, adaptable, unified." "And those who don't want to transcend?" Isabella challenged. Thornhill's expression was almost pitying. "Evolution doesn't require consent, Dr. Novak. It never has." A distant rumble shook the facility. Dust and ice particles drifted down from the ceiling. "They're here," Webb said. "Arctic Command's sterilization has begun." Screens around the chamber flickered to life, showing external cameras. Military aircraft hovered above Frostpoint Alpha, deploying what looked like specialized bombs. Where they struck the ice, intense heat flared, some kind of thermite weapon designed to burn hot enough to melt through the glacier and destroy everything within. "We expected this," Thornhill said calmly. "Fear is humanity's first response to the unknown, but they cannot stop what has already begun." She approached me, extending a partially crystallized hand. "You understand extremophile adaptation better than anyone, Everett. Your research laid the groundwork for understanding how life can thrive in supposedly uninhabitable conditions. Join us. Help guide the transformation." Isabella grabbed my arm. "Everett, don't listen to her. This isn't adaptation. It's annihilation of what makes us human." "What makes us human is our ability to evolve, to adapt, to transcend our limitations," Thornhill countered. "The visitor offers us the next step." Another explosion rocked the facility, closer this time. Warning lights flashed as structural integrity alarms blared. "We need to evacuate," Isabella insisted. "Now!" "There is nowhere to go," Webb said. "The surface is already being sterilized. But we have prepared for this." He gestured to the far wall, where other transformed staff members were gathering. The wall itself seemed to be shifting, ice and rock flowing like liquid to reveal a tunnel that hadn't existed before. "The glacier moves," Thornhill explained. "We move with it now. The transformation allows us to navigate through solid ice, to survive the pressure and cold. We will emerge miles from here, beyond their sterilization zone." She extended her hand to me again. "Last chance, Everett. Evolution or extinction." I looked at Isabella, whose eyes pleaded with me to refuse. I looked at the monitors showing the military's attack intensifying above us. I looked at the transformed humans, their bodies merging with the crystalline structures of the meteorites, becoming something beyond humanity. And I realized there was a third option. "The main vessel," I said. "You said it's coming within the year. Where will it land?" Thornhill hesitated, then apparently decided I needed to know. "The Antarctic shelf, where the ice is thickest, most stable. The transformation will spread from there." I nodded, filing away the information. "I need time to decide." "There is no time," Webb insisted as another explosion shook, loose chunks of ice from the ceiling. "Then go," I told them. "If your transformation is as powerful as you claim, you'll survive without me. I need to see for myself what this change truly means." Thornhill studied me for a moment, then nodded. "The specimens in Lab 3 are still viable. Exposure to them will begin your transformation if you choose it. But don't wait too long. This facility won't exist in 30 minutes. She turned and joined the others at the tunnel. Before entering, she looked back once more. "When you understand, find us. The visitor has connected all our minds now. We'll know when you join us." They disappeared into the tunnel, which sealed behind them, leaving Isabella and me alone in the chamber with the dormant meteorites. "We need to warn someone," Isabella said immediately, "about the Antarctic landing site." "First, we need to survive this," I countered, leading her back toward the upper levels. "There might still be emergency evacuation protocols we can access." As we raced through the disintegrating facility, I made a crucial decision. We detoured to Lab 3, where I quickly located the specimens Thornhill had mentioned, vials of blue crystalline fluid. "What are you doing?" Isabella demanded, as I pocketed one of the vials. "Insurance," I told her, "and possibly the only evidence that might convince the world of what's coming." We managed to reach Level 1 just as the ceiling of the command center collapsed. The remains of the facility were burning despite the ice surrounding it. The thermite weapons created heat intense enough to overcome even Arctic cold. In the chaos, we found an emergency escape hatch and survival gear. Without speaking, we both knew our odds of survival in the Arctic wilderness were minimal, but still better than remaining in the disintegrating base. The surface was a hellscape of fire and ice. Military aircraft circled overhead, methodically destroying every trace of Frostpoint Alpha. In the confusion, they didn't notice two figures in white survival gear slipping away across the ice shelf. We walked for hours, following the emergency beacon's directions toward the nearest outpost, a weather station 30 miles south. The cold was indescribable, cutting through our protective gear like knives. Isabella collapsed first, her body temperature dropping despite everything we tried. "Leave me," she gasped. "You have to warn them. Antarctic." I couldn't leave her, but I also knew we would both die if something didn't change. With frozen fingers, I removed the vial from my pocket. "This might save you," I told her, "but you might not be you afterward." She shook her head weakly. "Rather die human." I respected her choice. I held her until her breathing stopped and her body grew stiff in the relentless cold. Then, alone and facing my own imminent death, I made my choice. I opened the vial and let one drop of the blue fluid touch my tongue. The change began immediately. A burning sensation that spread outward from my core, fighting back the deadly cold. My vision sharpened, colors intensifying, new spectrums becoming visible. And in my mind, voices, distant but growing clearer. The transformed personnel from Frostpoint. They sensed me joining them, I continued towards the weather station, my body fighting the transformation, even as it saved me from the cold. By the time I arrived, my fingertips had begun to crystallize, and I could perceive electromagnetic fields around the station's equipment. I managed to send one heavily encrypted message to a former colleague at the university, coordinates for the Antarctic landing site and a warning about what was coming before the military arrived to rescue me. And now here I am, locked in this bathroom at a military medical facility, watching blue crystalline patterns spread across my skin. They think they have me contained, but the transformation is nearly complete. Soon I'll be able to pass through walls as Webb and the others did, to join the growing network of transformed humans preparing for the arrival. The question that haunts me is whether I've betrayed my species or saved it by warning them of what's coming. Is this truly evolution, or is it extinction of everything that makes us human? The voices in my mind grow louder, more insistent. They're calling me to Antarctica to help prepare for the arrival. And despite everything, I find myself wanting to go, because the most terrifying thing isn't the transformation itself. It's that as it progresses, it doesn't feel wrong anymore. It feels inevitable, like the next natural step, like coming home to what we were always meant to become. The scratching at the door has stopped. They found another way in. I've recorded everything now. If you're reading this and you're still fully human, you have a choice to make: evolution or extinction. Choose wisely. I no longer know which I chose, but I do know this. Look to the stars. They're coming, and nothing, not Arctic fire, not military might, will stop the arrival. The ice has only ever been a temporary tomb. What sleeps beneath is awakening. And soon, so will you.